Hello and welcome to Chapter 10 for Business Ethics. The title of our chapter this week is Changing Work Environments and Future Trends. And this chapter is a case study in and of itself on how quickly things can change. This was published in 2018, and all four of the major topics that we're going to cover have had radical changes from between 2018 and now in 2023. We have a couple of weeks after we finish up the textbook where we are looking in depth at case studies that touch upon all the ethical issues we've looked at throughout the semester, but especially this chapter, as so many things have changed in the last 5 years when it comes to telecommuting, alternatives to traditional patterns of work, and of course robotics and AI. Workplace campuses, still very similar trends, and of course a lot of the material in this chapter is still accurate and valid. There just have been updates. So let's take a look at the first section, more telecommuting or less. Identify the benefits of permitting employees to work from home, explain some of the drawbacks, and then think about the ethical issues that might crop up when some or all of your workforce is working from home or a remote location that is not a centralized office atmosphere. As always with these slides, we jump right into the info pictorials, but we can think about some introductory stuff first. What is telecommuting? In the 1970s, this was the term that was coined for people that worked off-site. But of course, in the 70s, there wasn't as much technology that could facilitate such a high percentage of the workforce working from not the office. So of course the internet and home computing getting much more powerful has facilitated a workplace atmosphere in the United States and the wider world in which you don't really have to be at a centralized office for many different types of roles or tasks. Now, in 2014, which is a good full decade ago, there were still options. So 90% of companies in the United States offered some kind of remote work, even if it was only for some small subsystem, some sub-percentage, of their employees, or for one or two particular roles. And at that same time, other countries had similarly high options, at least in part, for working remotely. In our book, we get some numbers from 2012 saying that 4 million people in the United States did remote work for at least part of their work week. And that's not very much when you consider that the workforce in the United States hovers between 140 and 150 million. So 4 million out of 150 million is not that much. But we know that the numbers now, after the pandemic, after 2020, would be radically different. And we will take a look at that when we move into our case studies in the last few weeks. What about the benefits of remote work for employees, for employers, and maybe for both? We are well aware of some of these. Again, since the pandemic, it saves a whole lot of time to not have to commute. Some people have up to 2-hour commutes every day, and that would save them 4 hours of traveling that they now have back in their life. Average commutes are a little bit less, but that's still going to give you 1 to 3 hours extra time in your day. It drops your costs. It doesn't matter if you are using public transportation or you have your own vehicle. Both of those modes of transportation are associated with investments constantly. Gas, tolls, fees, tickets. So if you don't have to do any of that, you are saving time, but you are also saving money. It has been shown to decrease stress, not only because commuting is stressful, but you are in an environment, your home usually, but not always, where you are more comfortable and your needs are oftentimes being met better by your own choices than they would in a centralized office. And theoretically, at least, it would improve a work-life balance because you do get those several hours back that you can then invest in your family, your home, your friends, your hobbies, your health, the goals that you choose. What about for employers? Well, data have shown that people are more efficient when they work from home. Some managers were afraid that without direct supervision at all times, people would slack off, but it's turned out for the most part to be the opposite. Maybe because there's trust, maybe because people are afraid of losing their jobs in an economy that has been in a downturn, maybe because they can organize their own day and have agency over their own life, which is a pretty big deal. We've come to find making choices for yourself and how to structure your day. Turns out people are a lot more efficient when they work from home. They have higher productivity. Another thing that's good for employers is they can save money on office management costs. They need fewer supplies. They don't have to worry so much about plumbing or lunch or office space or anything that comes along with maintaining a professional building for a long time over time. Benefits for everybody are if there are fewer cars on the road, if there are fewer people commuting back and forth, there's going to be less air pollution, there's going to be less greenhouse emissions, there's going to be less oil used. So that kind of course, benefits everybody. What about negatives, though? There, of course, can not only be positives. We get a little story from the CEO of Yahoo in 2013 who thought that teleworking had gone too far, and she recalled all employees to work a more traditional 9 to 5, Monday to Friday sort of work. And she said it's because people are not cooperating, communicating, or collaborating well. Some other businesses sort of followed her lead. We got a list: Aetna, IBM, Bank of America. There was an uproar, an outcry. People often had joined particular companies because of the fact that they could work remotely, at least partially, and now the companies were feeling this backlash and going all the way the other way. Now you might be thinking here, like a lot of people think, and I don't understand why it isn't more widely accepted, some kind of hybrid model where you get the best of both worlds, working from home or remotely sometimes, occasionally going in to get this cooperative brainstorming and communication that's face to face. Because one of the real negatives is it's so much easier to misunderstand and miscommunicate online. And I'm sure this has happened to all of us, where you are primarily texting with someone. It could be a friend, a family member, a girlfriend, or a boyfriend, and you misinterpret one another's words. You think someone's being sarcastic when they're not, or vice versa, or the timing of your text messages upsets someone, and it's really hard to get across what you actually are thinking and intending when you only have text messages on a screen. Some other downsides for employers are that employees might be less likely to ask for help because they think that they have to get everything done on their own. They're more isolated, when in reality, you can ask for assistance, ask questions, be more collaborative. That's a really big downside. Remote workers might worry on the employee side about privacy. When you're at home, your family life is going on in the background, and things blur. The work-life balance might become more of a I'm always working at home kind of balance, and you don't know necessarily how to shut off. One that bothers me a little bit, more is they say some managers worry that they can't monitor their employees and think again that if there's not direct monitoring, there's going to be a lot less productivity and efficiency. I personally think that that is bad management, but that is my perspective. If you set reasonable goals and most of your employees are meeting them every week, and don't try to completely disregard the fact that they're adults and can choose to complete all the tasks for their jobs, that's going to give you that kind of long-term efficiency that close monitoring and suspicion never will. But again, that is my viewpoint and not necessarily a neutral one. Some other sort of unconscious negative things that can happen with telecommuting is that if some part of the workforce is in office and some part is at home, people have what's known as the mere exposure effect. It's a part of our psychology that what is right in front of us turns out to be more comforting, appealing, and desirable than things that are kind of out of sight, out of mind. So if people are toiling away at home, even if they're efficient, even if they're productive, even if they're a fantastic employee, the people who are in front of the manager's faces every day are more likely to be the ones who are thought of for promotions and bonuses and trainings because of quirks of how human psychology works. There's also can be a negative bias for people that work at home, one that you have to claw your way out of even just to be at zero, because you're looked at as lazier or different, even unconsciously, by management teams and executives. What about ethical issues that arise? Well, that's one of them. The fact that there can be inequality of opportunity for promotion and raises, and recognizing the true value of employees just because they're not in front of your face every day, that's an ethical dilemma. If you want to be an ethical management team or manager of a remote workforce, the suggestions that we get from our book are developing trust in remote workers, encouraging trust among project team members when some are working remotely, keeping equity in mind when reviewing performance of both the remote and in-office staff, and deciding which employees get to work remotely. It can't just be some get to and other people never have the opportunity. There might be an instance in which one person asks for it, but then to be ethical, you have to think, well, okay, I can't just offer it to them. I have to offer it to my team at large. Otherwise, it's just not fair. Set up careful policies to govern at work, home at work, and ensure fairness. And perhaps consider a hybrid kind of solution in which people can both work remotely and sometimes come in for that creative collaboration that can be key to forwarding your business goals. They say what is unethical for an employer is to set up remote employees into a situation where they can't help but fail. It would be helpful to train them in time management skills so they can maintain their productivity and learn about how there are different distractions in the home or remote environment and how you might manage those in order to maintain your focus while you are working. The second part of the chapter is all about workplace campuses. So we know that a lot of the big tech companies like Apple and Microsoft and Google and Facebook, or Meta as it's now known, used to even be Twitter, but they're dismantling it a bit, have these huge sprawling complexes that not only have offices with desks and conference spaces, but also cafeterias and places to relax, places to get massages, places to take naps, uh, fancy coffee stands, and snacks that are available all the time. Some of them even go further and have doctors' offices on campus and appointments where you can get massages. So you don't even have to ever leave work to meet these needs that everybody has. But what's good and bad about them? There's definitely some benefits and there are definitely some downsides. We're going to think about if these kinds of campuses compare to anything in history or if they're brand new, and think about the ethical challenges that arise around and within the ideas of workplace campuses. So the first obvious negative is that if everything's on site, again, work-life balance might get destroyed. All this extra bonus stuff, games rooms and beer and food and socializing, might have the quite intended side effect of keeping salaried employees at work for much longer. Things can get murky when you are a salaried employee when it comes to how much time you should spend at work and doing your job. These benefits can improve quality of life while you're at work, but at the same time, again, just really mess with your ability to separate out your private life to your work life. And they aren't brand new. That's the spoiler alert. When mass production was first being implemented in the early 1900s, where we had enough technology to have production lines. Of course, capitalism is quite a little bit older than that, but mass production was new. And a lot of times these big factories would be far apart from city centers. So there weren't cars, there weren't really easy ways to get from city centers to the fringes of the cities. Some companies, like the Ford Company, decided to build company towns. So right around the factory, there would be the houses where people would work, and these are some of the very first suburbs, by the way, at least in the way we know suburbs today. Just rows and rows of houses with its own set of stores and services. So the company owned everything. They owned the doctor's offices, they owned the hardware stores, they owned the grocery stores, they owned the bars, and your paycheck would go straight back into the company's pocket. Added to that, some of these CEOs and leaders back then were utopian visioned, and they thought that they could shape the lower economic classes to be moral in the way that they thought morality should go. As you can imagine, that didn't last long, and people really chafed under those kinds of imposed rules, not to mention the sort of monopoly that can happen when one company owns everything you need. It can drive up prices of milk and a doctor's appointment and drive down wages because you're kind of stuck there. Your house is there. It would be a really big deal for you to try and get out. Not possible, but difficult. Fast forward to the last couple of decades and we get places like the Googleplex. This one's the one out in California where they even have an herb garden you can go to and see where the herbs are coming from that are going into the lunch that you get for free. There's an interesting case from the real world about acuity, but I'm going to save that for your homework. And this is the real world acuity case, so we'll just not worry about that one for now and move on to a computer rendering. I don't know why they have a computer rendering of it. There are many pictures of it out there, but this is the Apple campus in California. Before he died, Steve Jobs built this ring. I think it said $5 billion. That can't be right. Yes, $5 billion to construct, which is just an insane amount of money. And it has all of those amenities that you might imagine. It even has a stage here in the middle. They have concerts, a 4-story cafeteria. The shape of the circle is supposed to facilitate connection and communication with all of the different departments within Apple. And it got a lot of flack because, yes, it was an investment into the area, but again, it was on the outskirts of the urban area and thus didn't really provide a lot of jobs or benefits for the community that was and is already there. So one ethical question that immediately pops up with these workplace campuses is how integrated should they be into the community? Should they be little tiny bubbles that don't provide any sort of real integration into the wider community? Or is it okay that they're more insular, and that means in and of themselves? These are the questions for that particular case from the real world. Is that what it's called again? Yes, case from the real world. Apple. So that's 2 out of 4 sections in this chapter. I'm going to end right there, and I will see you in part 2.